Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and I am back with a quick video giving you my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal that happened this morning. I wanted to get a video out really quick about this because, can you believe it? It finally happened. After years of speculation and rumors and leaks and all this stuff, we finally get an official look at the Switch 2, and I've got quite a few thoughts about this. Now, I'll be honest, when the original Switch was released back in 2017, I was skeptical. I didn't know if I wanted a hybrid system, a system that would be both a handheld and a dock, but it turns out that the original Switch is one of my favorite consoles of all time. It's an awesome system. And because of that, over the years, I built up a pretty sizable Switch game collection, and so I have a vested interest in the Switch 2 and what it's going to bring to the table. Today's reveal is lacking in a lot of technical information. However, we can get a pretty decent idea as to what to expect. The first one being, it's going to have a bigger screen and also bigger Joy-Cons. And it appears that this is going to have an 8-inch display. That's up from a 6.2-inch display on the original. And I have to tell you, that's good news for me. The thing is, I'm getting older, and so having a larger display is something that I very much appreciate. I'm having to wear readers every once in a while when I'm using stuff, and so just having a larger display, I think, is the right move. Also, too, they originally had a Switch Lite, and that only worked in handheld mode. You couldn't dock it, and I never really liked that very much. Again, I didn't need a smaller Switch. I always wanted a larger one, so I'm glad that we're getting one. But let's go ahead and talk about those Joy-Cons. So they're doing a big change here. Instead of having those rails that you slide in and snap, that was the big marketing thing that they always did with the original Switch, was that snap, right? Well, it appears that these are going to be magnetic, and that's pretty interesting change there, because immediately I think, okay, is it going to be sturdy in handheld mode where they just are magnetically snapped in? But it's Nintendo, and so they're obviously going to test it a lot, and so that's an interesting change for sure. However, they have this mouse mode, which I think is pretty interesting. So essentially, on the bottom of the controller, you can see there's a little optical cutout there, kind of like a mouse, and they show it actually moving around like a mouse, which is unexpected. Having that option all of a sudden gives you the ability to play PC-like games or control games like a PC, right? So you could do like first-person shooters in this mouse mode, which I think a lot of people prefer sometimes. Also, controlling games like a mouse, especially, some strategy games and things like that, having that option, that actually could be kind of cool. So now that I think about it, that actually is a pretty cool little option. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that. However, I think the big question for a lot of us is, are they going to finally address thumbstick drift? That was a huge problem with the original Switch. Specifically, those thumbsticks would start drifting after a while. And, I ran into this, Reggie ran into it, pretty much everyone who owns an original Switch would eventually run into, this drifting that would happen. And so that is one of the worst, or, most problematic parts of the original Switch. And I think we're all going to be curious to see if they use Hall effect sticks. That gets rid of that problem. And so I assume that Nintendo is going to do that. They didn't talk about it here, but I'm going to be looking to see if they do that eventually, or when this finally comes out, or they give us a little bit more details about it. I would like to see them specifically talk about that and how they fixed it for the new, Switch. And then finally with the Joy-Cons, I do like how they're sticking with the red and blue theme on those. And, I always like that look of the very first version of this. And so it's kind of cool that they're sticking with that for now. Obviously, going forward, they'll probably do a lot of different colors and themes. And, they'll do a Zelda version and a Mario version. But I like how they're sticking with red and blue. Getting back to the main design of this, it looks like it's slightly more rounded. I think that's a good move on their part. It just looks more modern that way. I did notice that on the top of the device there is an additional USB-C port, so that's kind of interesting. just to have probably more options in the future. I'm not entirely sure what Nintendo would have planned for that, but again, having more USB-C ports is always a good thing, and it kind of makes it a little bit more future-proof. I also noticed that there is a headphone jack, a physical headphone jack in 2025. Definitely becoming a thing you don't see as often anymore, but you know what? Again, more options here, more support for different types of connections, and it's nice to see a physical headphone jack. They gave us a look at the kickstand, and no radical changes here. Not much you can do with the kickstand, although it does appear that it's going to support more viewing angles. So that's cool if you have it, on a table with friends, or maybe you're traveling, you just have a little bit more options with that kickstand. That's a good move. And then they give us a little bit more information about backwards compatibility with previous Switch games. And this is good to see. So basically it's going to support both physical and digital Switch games. Yes, that's great, especially for collectors like me. However, they are saying that not every game will work, and a little asterisk there. And that's to be expected, because from the leaks and information that we've gotten so far, this is using a much newer, obviously 10 years newer technology from NVIDIA to create the Switch 2. And in doing so, there's challenges with backwards compatibility. It'll be interesting to see just how much of an issue this is, how many games aren't supported. If it's like a small percentage, if it's 1 or 2%, I'm okay with that. If it's like 30% don't work, that would be a problem. It's going to be curious to see if this is really just running emulation for Switch 1. I think that's probably possible. And if that's the case, then they can update that as they go along. And also, developers could patch in fixes for the Switch 2. So going to be keeping an eye on that, especially again, since I have so many original Switch games. I would like them all to work in a perfect world. And obviously this is going to be a more powerful handheld. Again, no specific details at this time, but there are estimates that put this just below the Xbox Series S when docked. So if that's true, that's impressive. I mean, I think that's going to be kind of what we expect here. This has a new NVIDIA chip that supports upscaling as well as ray tracing. So it's a little bit future-proof in that regard. The upscaling, I think, is going to be the key here, especially in handheld mode. Well, probably also in docked as well. It's going to allow those games to run at an internal lower resolution, but then use upscaling to make it look better on the display. And this reminds me of kind of what M Classic did with the original Switch, where if you bought that device, it essentially would kind of do that. It would upscale and add anti-aliasing and some of those sort of things. And I think that's just gonna be built into this Switch 2. And the other thing I noticed that is kind of interesting is that, this is the first time that I'm aware of that Nintendo has used a 2 in the follow-up console, right? In the name of a console. In the past, they've always done the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy Advance. They didn't call it, the NES 2 or the Game Boy 2. So I thought it's kind of interesting that they're using a 2 here. It's not a big deal, but it does show the importance of the original Switch, that they didn't come up with something silly like the Wii U, right? That was a terrible name at the time. I'm glad to see that they didn't try to do something with the follow-up to the original Switch here. Although, to be fair, I wouldn't have, complained or minded if they would have called this the Super Switch or the Switch Advance. I think that would have been kind of a nice little nod to the past. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And then some things I'd like to learn going forward, in a future, Nintendo Direct. Obviously how many original Switch games will work day one. They didn't show hardly any games running on it. They only showed a new Mario Kart game, which is cool. Again, that's going to be a day one purchase for sure. But I would like to know, can games be patched later? I assume they probably can. The other thing I'd really like to know is, will the Switch 2 support video out when in handheld mode, like pretty much every other modern day handheld? This is especially nice if you're traveling, right? And so, you're in a hotel room, You know, the fact that the original Switch doesn't do video out from the handheld itself, you need to bring the dock or maybe some third-party adapter, is kind of annoying. And so I'm really hoping that they build that into the new Switch 2. Also, we need to know battery life. You know, we want to know how long the battery is going to last. I assume it's going to be like the original Switch, which is fine. And then also real world, you know, performance numbers. You know, how do these new games, you know, how are they going to look? How are they going to run? That sort of thing. You know, some people are saying that this is more powerful than the Steam Deck, which is good. And, you know, possibly to be expected, right? The Steam Deck is a couple years old. So I'm glad it's not, you know, using really old technology. But I would like to know, you know, can modern AAA games get released on the Switch 2 and run decently? That would be pretty cool. But as you can tell, I'm very excited for the Switch 2. I am a big fan of the original, and I'm really excited to see that they're going forward with physical games. That's important for us collectors. And yeah, I hope to get one day one and possibly even go to one of these events that they're going to have, you know, where they're going to do a hands-on event. So we'll have to see what happens. But anyways, guys, love to know what you think down in the comments below. What did you think of the Switch 2 reveal today? Are you going to pick one up? Are you on the fence about it? Let me know. All right, guys, thanks for watching.